All right, so let's talk about some visceral fat. So first of all, there's two different really big kinds of fat. Okay, that was interesting. The visceral fat sits in between your organs, and there are two totally different types of tissue. The visceral fat is actually metabolically active, and it produces things like cytokines. Cytokines are part of your inflammatory response. So some of you guys and women who have more visceral fat, you're going to have more inflammation. You're going to have more joint pain. You're going to have more fatigue. You're going to have higher rates of cancer. You're going to have much higher rates of insulin resistance and diabetes and then dementia. So this is a really, really big deal, getting rid of that visceral fat. This is another part of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's another type of visceral fat. But the big thing is that think about it, like if you've got fat sitting in or around your organs, they can't function very well. Your lungs can't move as well. Your diaphragm can't move as well. Like all those things, it's harder to breathe. It's harder to move. And you just, since it grows slowly, you just kind of get used to it. It's the whole frog in the pot idea. So this is one of those things that we really, really, really try to peel out. Now, one of the other problems we get into is that because of this visceral fat being metabolically active and producing inflammatory cytokines and things like this, it also becomes substantially harder to lose subcutaneous fat. So losing the fat at all is more difficult because of this visceral fat issue. So there's a variety of things that lead to creation of visceral fat. Processed foods are a big one. The reason that processed foods do this is because processed foods carry unnatural chemicals, man-made chemicals, that are designed to keep bacteria and things from breaking them down and utilizing them. So these chemicals are toxic to living tissue, like bacteria. And your gut uses bacteria to break things apart so you can utilize it. So processed foods are creating a massive issue. Yeah, the dyes, all that stuff, like all the stuff RFK is trying to get rid of, all the stuff that the medical system, and by the way, the medical system is also all your food. The FDA, Food and Drug, yeah, the medical system is controlling all of your food as well. So all that stuff is tearing you up. And then this very high glycemic functions, these high sugars, these high insulin producing foods are creating this mass storage event. And what ends up happening is that once your liver gets full of sugar, once it gets full of glycogen, it can't put it anywhere else. So it literally starts leaking. And as it starts leaking, it turns to fat because your body stores sugars in the muscle tissue as glycogen, as the liver is glycogen, then everything else gets stored as fat. Well, once the liver is full, it literally starts like just coating the inside of your intestines, and not your intestines, the inside of your organs. So your entire visceral space outside the organs with fat. That's the visceral fat. There's a couple different ways to get rid of it. However, I will tell you the fastest and the best way and the healthiest way is with peptides like retatrutide. Retatrutide has been spectacular at helping break all that stuff off and move it out. I can actually feel smaller and leaner and more functional inside. It is the weirdest thing. It's super hard to describe, but that's one of the things that were going on. And so just Google retatrutide and visceral fat, and you'll see that it helps peel it out. Now, this is one of those things we all kind of have to understand. Again, we all want the super easy thing that doesn't, has no side effects and you can use it super easy. Retatrutide is really great and you can use it with very little side effects and everything. But if you really want to maximize this function, you need to start doing some other things, right? This isn't I don't want you to necessarily think of this as a, magic bullet that fixes everything. And it's a part of a whole. And so one of the things we've got to do is we got to increase, your hormonal function. So you bring your testosterone levels up to where they're normal functional for your body. Bring your D3 levels up so they're functional for your body. Excuse me. Then we've got to start bringing in a little bit of a dietary change. Now, here's the thing. When I say dietary change, people are always like, oh, I can't eat my favorite foods. No, that's the only way to make a sustainable diet is to make it out of your favorite foods. So pizza, brownies, ice cream, cookies, cake, briskets, like all those things you can eat, like all the time. So, I eat pecan pie pretty much every time I eat. So it's one of those things where it's not, okay, you have to get away from the calories nonsense the medical system's trying to confuse you with. You have to kind of go into macro function. When I consume this food, what does it do inside my body? What is the hormonal response inside my body? That's entirely how this whole thing works. Nothing to do with calories. But once you start understanding, oh, if I make my cookie dough differently, one of the major things is swapping the sweetener from, processed white sugars to erythritol, monk fruit, swerve, allulose. Like there's a whole big list of them. Stevia is in there. There's a whole big list. And if you do it right, you can't even tell. So you get to eat chocolate chip cookie dough as part of your health function. It's pretty spectacular. We make amazing pancakes and all sorts of stuff. So that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is changing the chemistry that you put into your body that will radically change your health. Now, this visceral fat thing is really, really, really big. Google some of that stuff and see what it's doing. But it is metabolically active, which means it's producing different chemicals. The cytokines it produce inflammation. Now, remember, when we have high inflammation, we're going to have high insulin. That's one of the things that's almost always paired together. High insulin creates insulin resistance. Insulin resistance creates diabetes. So some of you guys out there, not all of you, some of you are fighting a losing battle because your visceral fat is literally fighting against you. So the little dietary changes you made, while are phenomenal from a mental health standpoint and from a dedication standpoint, I applaud you for making the changes. They're not going to get you where you want to go because you've lived 10, 20, 15 years, putting stuff in your body that has created problems. And so now you have something inside of you, the visceral fat, that is literally creating problems for your whole body. And if we don't start getting rid of it, you're never going to get above, on top of that hill. So this is why, the peptides are really, really, really great. This is one of the reasons that we're starting to see phenomenal health changes with some of these things. And while I was big on GLP-1s, I think they're great and they're fantastic tools. The retatrutide is a triple agonist. It's what it ends up doing is it's a GLP-1, GIP, and it's a glucagon agonist, which means it works on the entire metabolic processes. So it's going to reduce insulin resistance. It's going to increase your body's insulin sensitivity. So it's literally the opposite of insulin resistance. It's going to help your body to function more with producing glucagon and then recognizing and utilizing glucagon. Glucagon is the hormone that tells your body to stop storing sugar as fat and start burning fat as a fuel source. Now, here's the other fun thing. When your insulin is high, your body cannot shift over and burn fat. So if you have high visceral fat that's holding your insulin levels high, guess what you cannot do? You cannot burn the visceral fat off. So you get this position where, and it wasn't your fault, you didn't know, everyone lied to you and told you that it was calories and told you that you should eat a high glycemic grain-based diet. So, and that testosterone was bad for you. So, and that saturated fat was going to kill you, which saturated fat is super critical. So everything you've been told about how your body works is a lie to make you sick. And so that people could, pharma and insurance companies could profit off of your illness. So this is the entire setup of the medical system to this point. So it's not your fault. You just did what you were told to do. You quit eating the eggs and started eating the breads and, took your cholesterol meds and now you're completely destroyed. So let's walk this back a little bit. So one of the things that we can use these peptides to do is start to reduce our visceral fat levels. If we pair that with a really great diet that is low in processed foods and higher in saturated fats, protein's fantastic. It depends on the diet we're doing. But we can run a high protein diet, that's great. But if we're trying to burn fat, one of the best things to do is, and again, not everybody can do this, work with somebody who knows how to put this together. But one of the best things we can do is shift you over to a fat burning diet. So once your body is burning fat as its primary fuel source, if you start doing intermittent fasting, if you just reduce the amount of food you're consuming, your body will remain burning fat, this is one of those great things, one of the little hacks we use when people want to start doing intermittent fasting. If you move yourself over to where your body is primarily burning fat as its primary fuel source, you're not going to be as hungry because you still have lots of fat. And so you'll be good. You don't get these blood sugar swings because your body starts regulating blood sugar control a little bit differently. Again, it uses up the glycogen that's in your liver. It uses up the glycogen that's in your muscle tissues. And it uses up, a little bit of the protein you're consuming will be turned to sugar for your blood. So there's a big difference. And this is one of the things that people keep asking me, all my bodybuilder buddies keep asking me, like, how are you not losing all this muscle tissue while you're fasting for 47 hours? because my body is in a fat burning state, a fat oxidizing state. So its primary fuel source is fat. So my muscles are running on ketones and fat, my organs, my brain, everything's running on ketones and fat, but my blood has to run on sugar. So the sugar that's in my liver, the sugar that's in my muscle tissues can be pulled out and utilized for blood function. And as I consume the collagens, or I consume whatever else I'm eating, the proteins that I eat, every time I do eat, those are all broken up and stuck into that glycogen, stuck back in the liver for me to use as we go along. But the entire body is running off of fat. The problem is that if we're eating carbohydrates and we're allowing our body to be fueled from a glucose standpoint, and your body is in a glucose-fed state, it will maintain that glucose-fed state by ripping apart your muscle tissues in order to produce enough sugar to run your entire body. And this is why we see such massive, massive muscle loss with GLP-1s, because these guys aren't on the right diet. No one walked them through the biochemistry, because the medical doctors who are doing this, using these metabolic tools, have no idea how the body actually works. They believe cholesterol is bad for you. They believe that, D3 is fine as long as it's over 30. They believe that SSRIs are good for you. They believe that testosterone is bad for you. So all the things that a lot of these guys think that keto diets are damaging to your health. A lot of these guys believe that carbohydrates are essential. So they have no functional understanding of nutrition. They have no functional understanding of biochemistry. And then they just don't understand why people are losing the muscle mass. So make sure you're working with somebody who understands metabolic function, who doesn't use BMI, who doesn't use the calorie system, who understands the metabolic processes, what's going on, who can help you walk through your diet. No one should be getting GLP-1s, retatrutide, or any of these things from a healthcare provider without that healthcare provider at least offering to walk them through the dietary changes and the exercise changes that are required to make these things functional and healthy. So we do a lot of that here. If you can't find somebody who's doing that, get a hold of us and we'll help you walk you through it. But that's the big thing. So if you guys have not started looking at your visceral fat issues as one of your major problems for not only fat loss, but blood sugar control, for the chronic pain, for energy issues, it's really, really, really important that you look at this visceral fat. The visceral fat also increases the chances of sleep apnea, which further increases your chances of inflammation, which further increases your chances of cancer and all these other things. So there's a lot of this stuff that if you just kind of walk in and be like, okay, how is the body designed to work? What's going on? How do we change those things? How do we bring it back to original design? Your body's going to work a whole lot better. So if you guys haven't had a conversation with somebody about visceral fat, I would really recommend that you get a hold of somebody and start chatting about that. The retatrutide so far, with the people we've been working with and the people who I've been talking to who've been using this for a while now, we have substantially less side effects. We have substantially more beneficial function. It's been really, really fantastic. But then again, it's one of those things where we've had semaglutide for a really long time. That's the generation ones. And so it just stands to reason that as we started doing more research and working on these things a little bit more, we'll be able to develop and refine what we're doing. And that's where we're at with retatrutide. And it is spectacular. And I highly recommend that you guys look into it. But again, anything strong enough to help is strong enough to hurt. So make sure you're working with somebody who understands what they're doing and how they're doing it. And if your docs don't recommend, checking your hormones, talking about any type of at least movement exercises, they don't have to go to the gym and work out like me, but you do have to kind of do some stuff. And, those dietary functional changes, I would be a little bit worried about where your care is going. But if you guys have any questions, hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com, or drop us in the DMs, or just give us a call, pillarsofwellness.com, chalmerswellness.com. Talk to you guys later. Have a fantastic day. Happy Friday.